We are in the middle of letter 8. If you have the old-fashioned print, it's page 224. It's also where we're up to today. It's the beginning of the Chitas for the 26th day of Av on the standard year. So hopefully everyone can find what page we're up to. And a moment of review. This letter, which was written in the late 1780s, the Alter Rebbe is making an appeal for supporting Eretz Yisrael. I mean, it's tzedakah in general, but that's primarily where it was going, which is appropriate. Now, before we start getting up our defenses against here's another fundraiser, the Alter Rebbe starts to spiritualize and gives us the underpinnings of what's going on in the spiritual worlds when a person does tzedakah. So we've essentially introduced two concepts. Tzedakah, which most literally translates as justice and justified, like tzaddik and tzedek and other words of that etymology, in contrast to chesed, which is translated more, we use the English word kindness, but we mean unlimitedness. And those are some of the differences between them. So tzedakah is measured, chesed is unmeasured, uncapped, unlimited. Now, we say in the davening, before we say the Shema, we say Zoreya tzedakos matzmiach yeshuos, translated as he plants tzedakah and it blossoms with rescue. So a little bit later on in this letter, we're going to revisit the significance of the analogy of tzedakah to seeds and planting, and the disproportionate on the upside response from our activities. When our activities are similarly unbounded, they are chesed more than simply tzedakah. Tzedakah is required, chesed is beyond required. And we're not simply, of course, talking about financial gifts, but we're talking about a general mindset. Do I live my life consumed with what I can take, or do I live my life consumed with what I can give? And this is essentially the differentiation between even tzedakah and chesed. Because even though the person is giving tzedakah, so you say, oh, I'm giving, but they're only giving in a limited fashion. So they're giving in order to execute their obligation. And this is essentially, like I hopefully say every time, the whole message of Tanya, which is to go beyond just your instinctual self-concern and making sure I have enough for myself and making sure that I'm cared for and looking out for number one, etc. That is emphasized here. And again, we're not talking about to abuse. I'm not talking about to self-harm. We understand that. The Alter Rebbe has much greater respect for his audience than to think that they are going to interpret this, that I should live literally in a refrigerator box and give away everything. That's not the concept. We're talking about changing the mentality from what is my requirement to being passionate to the point of excessive in the assistance to others. Okay, so here we are. Know ye this. That Hashem also has a midah of gevura, characteristic of gevura. Now, we've seen this term before. It's not new to us. It's worth reviewing for a moment. While chesed is limitless expression, so we translate chesed as kindness, but it's a little bit misleading, because the English word kindness suggests a virtue, a form of loving. But chesed in its most raw form means no limitations. We just had yesterday in the story of Noach, the flood is a form of chesed, no limitations. We have the word chesed in Torah. This is not only a conceptual idea, but in Torah, it refers to a person of no moral structure, because they have chesed. So yes, most times we call it the chesed fund, and chesed, it means kindness. However, chesed unchecked is unlimited lollipop. Sure, run in the street, no restraint, no limitations. Sounds usually is beneficial, but as you can imagine or see or understand, it can be very dangerous as well. And so we are not for unbridled, uncapped chesed. There needs to be gevura. Without gevura, it was going to be overwhelmingness. So the gevura attenuates so that the kindness is shaped. Tzimtzum, and that's of course the tzimtzum. Hopefully everyone recognizes this term already. Tzimtzum is the restraint of self to allow the other to flourish. So that it restrains and does not express itself. Now, here's where we have this very delicate balance. We often become very frustrated. Why isn't there more revelation of godliness? Why don't I see more evident godliness? And then we see more evident godliness. And as it was at Har Sinai, we were a little overwhelmed by it. Well, that's a little too much godliness for us. We need it to be slowed down. It's a little disturbing and scary. And so our pushback response is that Hashem has to attenuate the godliness so that it does not overwhelm us. And what is the mechanism for expressing it? Meaning, just like in a school situation, the teacher gives the students the information and the data. And then if it's too easy, then the child doesn't learn anything. If it's too hard, the child is overwhelmed. So what's the objective? To make it a little harder than the child thinks that they're capable of. So at first, they may be frustrated by it. It will, however, prompt them to stretch themselves to get to something far greater. So this is what it says. It is all linked to Isarusa de Lasata. This is a phrase, hopefully you recognize it. It translates as the motivation, the initiation comes from us. We are the ones who control and calibrate the revelation of godliness. How much godliness is revealed to us? Enough so as not to overwhelm us. How do we stimulate God to be more forthcoming of his godliness? By us, Shema Adam Misnag B'Chasidus, if we will conduct ourselves, excuse me, if we will conduct ourselves in a manner of limitlessness, as opposed to just compliance, lashpia chaim v'chesed, to gift life and kindness, chulu, kach me'or l'mayla, so too will Hashem respond to us. K'moshe Amar Razal, like the statement in the Talmud, b'midah she'adam moeded boy moededin loy, that as a person conducts himself, so is conducted with him. So, what is the mechanism for us to stimulate Hashem to be expressive of greater godliness when we will do the same? And again, we all recognize this in an interpersonal relationship. When I am locked down in my identity and my primary motivation and mentality is, what do I got to do to get what I want? So then everybody who I interact with is going to respond in kind. Now, this is not always a bad thing. For example, if I go to the grocery store and everybody is very friendly, but ultimately either I buy the groceries or else they're not really that interested in being my friend. They are a merchant. They see me as a customer. Yes, there can be something friendly about it. The essential premise of that relationship, though, is purely mercantile. So as much as I'll buy $50 worth of groceries, they'll give me $50 worth of groceries. That's the essence. That's the premise of that relationship. Yes, it can also be friendly, and you can wind up being friendly with your merchants and so forth. The base, the premise of the relationship, though, is a mercantile relationship. And again, if you've ever had the bad experience of thinking that you're in a personal relationship, only to then find out that the other person considers it a mercantile relationship of whatever form, even if it's a social relationship, but they see their socialization with you as a method through which they can achieve something else, it's very disappointing. Whereas if everybody understands that it's a mercantile relationship, so then, well, there can be friendliness, but then there isn't going to be a disappointment. Now, sometimes that's what happens in relationship with Hashem. For example, again, I'm sorry for one of my tangents here. Feel free to pull out the shepherd's crook and yank me back onto task, but I think it's relevant to this week's parsha. What is the distinctive quality of Avram Avinu? Noach knew about one God. Even in Abraham's own life, there was Malki Tzedek, Kohen Lekel Elyon, the priest to God on high, who Abraham gave a tithe. So it wasn't just that Abraham knew that there's one God and nobody else knew that. Or they thought there were 7, and this guy thought there was 6, and this guy 4, 3, 2, 1. The difference, the distinctive quality of Avram was that everybody else was looking for a God that would provide them with something. Why did they worship these other forces? Because they thought these forces would provide them with what they needed. This force will provide me with rain. This one will provide me with children. This one will provide me with health. This one will provide me with money, whatever it may be. Avram came along and said, we have our relationships upside down. Instead of looking at these forces as to what they will do for me, that the sun provides warmth and the moon provides light at night, whatever it is, we have to start seeing ourselves as being in the service of Hashem. The concept that there's a one creator God. And everybody else, well, I don't care who created it. Do I care who invented pencils? Just give me the best pencil. I don't care who created electronics. Just give me the best phone. So they saw their relationship with their gods as, again, a mercantile exchange. Which one will give me what I want? And then, if you show me one that'll give me something better, I discard. I discarded my BlackBerry for my iPhone. I discarded my 8-tracks for my DVDs, and now I discard them for my iTunes. And one day I'll discard iTunes for the next thing. So, if we conduct ourselves with Hashem in this kind of measured fashion, so we shouldn't be surprised to get a measured result. So what is the mechanism through which we can evoke a deeper relationship with Hashem? When we will conduct ourselves in a deeper manner, we will be misnaig bechasidus. We will do more than just compliance with the rule. We will conduct ourselves in a manner of chesed. Chesed, again, meaning limitless. So, so it continues, but here also we still have a question. We might ask the question, when we conduct ourselves in a spiritual manner with Hashem, we conduct ourselves in this infinite manner, this generous, limitless manner, we would anticipate that this would produce a spiritual response. That is, the disproportionate characteristic of our conduct when we act beyond just the requirements, we would anticipate would warrant us, it would benefit us with a spiritual reward. Why is it that it also impacts us at the physical human level? Remember, we talked about in the beginning of this letter, the practice of Rebbe Lezer, that prior to davening, he would give tzedakah. You say, what does tzedakah have to do with davening? Davening is between me and Hashem. Tzedakah is between me and another person. But we say that's the idea. How do we become connected with Hashem? So on the one level, very simple, correct level is, well, if you want to make somebody happy, take care of their kids. You teach their kids how to read their Chumash, the parents will do anything they can for you. So that's one level. But at a broader level, when I demonstrate that and not just go through the motions, and sincerity is the key to life. If you can fake that, you got it made. Meaning not just that I go through the motions, but I genuinely conduct myself in a limitless manner. I evoke from Hashem a similarly limitless manner. I evoke this type of response from Hashem. So too here, when a person gives tzedakah, which again, the conceptual idea is that I demonstrate that I'm going beyond myself. I don't see life as only what can I collect, what can I gather. I instead see what can I give. I probably shared the story with you before, but you're too polite to tell me. So I know this guy, and he just says things that most people think, but most people have a little more tact and don't say them out loud. But this guy is very, I don't know if the word is honest, but maybe he doesn't have that meter that says, well, maybe I shouldn't say this out loud. But I think what he says is what many people think, not us, of course, because we're perfect. But I once shared with him, I have no idea how this came up in context, that in Chabad, it is our custom that when we wrap tefillin, we wrap it from the inside out. And the message is that we want to give to the world, take from ourselves and give to the world. And he responded and said he did not agree with that. He thinks that the goal in life is to take from the world. Now, he's not talking about cheating. He's not talking about lying. He says you go around, the world is filled with experiences, knowledge, culture, art, and you should spend your life importing all of these things to make your life more meaningful and more enriched. Now, again, I think most people would probably agree with that. This is the basic concept of our animating soul, as you recognize from the end of the first chapter in Tanya. It's actually originally in the Gemara, that the instinct of human beings is what's in it for me. Now, we may portray that in the most grotesque fashion, but when a person says, I eat because I'm hungry, they're essentially saying, well, I've got to take care of myself. What's in it for me? And what the Alter Rebbe is attempting to move us off of is that we should be passionate about doing for others. Who is passionate about doing for others? Everyone. Because when you ask me, oh, yes, I love to help, my greatest pleasure. Fine. And I'm not saying it's not true. Then we need to do a little introspection. Is it our passion? Don't give me the list of all the things you do. Is that your passion? Is it your passion? And this is what the Alter Rebbe is saying. Why is it that this has an impact on us in the physical world? You might think this has an impact on the spiritual world. If I conduct myself in a generous fashion, Hashem will conduct himself to us. What does Hashem do? He gives us the spiritual things. We might not have thought, we seemingly, this is a spiritual experience. We daven. How does it change my physical life? It's a spiritual thing. And therefore, I should have some sort of spiritual response. How is it possible that this results in a change in my physical life? That's the sort of bewilderment that the Alter Rebbe is addressing. And again, maybe other people are addressing as well. Now, of course, remember the story about the man who learned that if you run away from honor, honor will run after you. So he wanted honor a lot. So he ran away from honor, but he didn't see that honor was pursuing him. So he went to his teacher and he says, I run away from honor, but honor isn't pursuing me. So his teacher said, right, because every time you look over your shoulder to see where honor is, it hides. So again, it's not about, well, let me be sincere and genuine, so I'll be rewarded for my sincerity and my genuine character. So the Alter Rebbe explains, what happens, how is it that it pushes away the darkness in our heart, which is the davening experience? So the Alter Rebbe says, Shehu b'chinas u'madreges tshuva ilah. This is that we reach this level called tshuva ilah. Now, you recall from when we learned in Iggeres HaTshuva, the previous section of Tanya, that the Alter Rebbe sort of, he didn't introduce it, but he utilizes these terms. We translate it as lower level. I don't like that word because lower seems to suggest inferior. So I'll instead use the word entry level tshuva and matured level of tshuva. Tshuva tata and tshuva ilah. In brief, tshuva tata is when I fix what I broke. I broke the window, I fixed it. I took it, I returned it. I raised my voice, I apologize. That's tshuva tata. That fixes the act. Tshuva ilah requires me to think deeper. What is it about my relationship with Hashem or with this person that was so weak that it allowed me to speak so harshly or to break or to be disregarding or not take seriously or not respect some aspect of their existence and identity? That's the deeper meaning of tshuva. Now, hopefully everybody recalls the imagery that Hashem's name, Yud and Hey, and Vav and Hey, if we imagine it instead of horizontally, we imagine it vertically. And tshuva, the last letter of tshuva being the Hey, And if we, God forbid, go places we shouldn't go, we wind up taking that aspect of Hashem with us to places Hashem doesn't want to be, both in the pragmatic, the entry-level tshuva, and also in the emotional. That is, if I betray someone emotionally, even though, quote unquote, what did I do that's so bad? But I betrayed the emotional connection. It requires something far more significant to realign a far more intense level of oneness than just, well, okay, here's the $5 for the item that I broke. This is that far more profound level that we are talking about. So plugging this concept into our context, when I do tzedakah, which is, again, what is required of me, my obligation, I return to, or I connect with the pragmatic aspect of godliness. I've done everything right. And as we've often talked about, the Alter Rebbe did not write Tanya to teach us to do the mitzvahs. For that, we got 100 or 100,000 other books to tell you when to stand up and when to sit down and when to lean to the left and don't lean to the left and eat this and don't eat that. So it's not simply about the relationship aspect. It's about the essence of our connection and more than the pragmatic. So this is the classic thing. I don't understand. I'm the perfect friend. I do this. I pick the person up. I share this. I'm good at it. Why is it that I have to? What is the person unhappy about? Because I am not present. So I'm an excellent davener. I read every word. I show up on time. So why is there not a deep spiritual, meaningful connection? And this is essentially why all of Hasidus came about, because all these people were compliant with the laws. They did what they were supposed to do. They stood up, they sat down, they leaned to the left, they didn't lean to the left, they did all of that. And there wasn't any sense of deep meaning. And this is that level of chesed, because we get over ourselves. Instead of thinking about, what do I got to do? And I'll be in compliance. So this is that level of tshuva ilah. This is far greater. When we say greater, we don't mean it's better, like 10 is bigger than 8, or 2 cookies are better than 1 cookie. We mean that it is far more personal. It's far more intensely aligned with the infinity of Hashem than olam haba, than the world to come. How do you know? What's the competition? Because the root of the word olam haba is still the word olam. And as we know, the word olam means concealed. It means hidden. It means we can't see it. So olam is limited. Olam haba, even that world which has yet to be, is still limited. So if I conduct myself in this limited fashion, then I get a limited result from Hashem. It's a mercantile, transactional relationship. It's only when I conduct myself in the infinity of chesed that I have an infinite relationship with Hashem. Now, a person may say, well, I go for Unasana Toikef. I want to be written and sealed for a good new year. I'm all for it, certainly not against it. I want to be written in the book of life. That's where I want to be. What do I got to do to get in the book of life? You got to show up. You got to listen. You got to, fine. Okay, now I'm done, right? Now I can go home. So and again, for some people, that is all they want out of their relationship with Hashem. They just want to know that they're written and sealed in the book of life and go home. The people who were clamoring to the Alter Rebbe wanted something more profound and more personal in their relationship with Hashem than just, what do I got to do to get what I want? And that's the difference between tzedakah, which is what you got to do, and chesed, that goes beyond it. And this is why we say, you recognize this quote, this is what we say, that it is more beautiful. And again, it's not competitive, like, oh, that's better, like 2 cookies are better than 1 cookie, or chocolate is better than vanilla, but it means it is a more personal aspect of my relationship with Hashem when I do tshuva and Maisim Tovim, which we'll talk about that in a moment, than all of Olam Haba, because Olam still is limited. It's still restrained. It's still 1,000 is still a limited number. Like we say, Olam Haba is only a glimpse. You're only getting something about it. Now, what is it about tshuva and maisim tovim? So again, as we talked a lot about during Iggeres HaTshuva, tshuva is not just for sins. There's an interesting discussion about whether tshuva is an obligation or an opportunity. Meaning, can a person say, I don't want to do tshuva, I'll take my punishment? I mean, you could, it's like, God forbid you get a ticket. They say you could pay the ticket, or you could go to court and fight it, or you could go and take a defensive driving course. It's up to you. So is tshuva in the same category? You don't have to do it. If you want to do it, this is the mechanism, but you don't have to do it. So what is the characteristic of tshuva? It's not just about fixing sins. It's about the endless pursuit of intensifying my relationship with Hashem. Now, again, we probably all encountered, not us, times when, I don't want to do this. Okay, so, if you work another 10 hours, you'll make more money. At some point, I just want to be the sort of the combatant of tshuva is sitting on the couch. It's essentially a kind of laziness, just sort of leave me alone-ness. So that's what we say, that tshuva is greater than Olam Haba, because tshuva is about the intensification of the relationship. Then we say maisim tovim. What are maisim tovim? Good deeds. Well, what is good deeds? If it's a mitzvah, it's a mitzvah. Because as we know, not every time a person does a mitzvah is it a good deed. If I do it with, like they say, an attitude, then it's a mitzvah, but it's not a good deed. I did it fully, but my attitude, my posture is, leave me alone. Don't bother me. So if I act in that way, and again, we've probably all experienced this in an interpersonal way, the person does you a favor, like he's doing you a favor. There is it does not engender closeness. To share a quick thought, we're in Parshas Lech Lecha. So it says in Hayom Yom that the beginning of Torah, Bereshis, Parsha number 1, starts off full of hope, but it quickly deteriorates. Parsha number 2, Parshas Noach, begins with kind of desperation. Hashem has to destroy the whole world. But at the end, there's a glimmer of hope because Avram is born. This week's Parsha Lech Lecha is the happy Parsha, because every day we talk about Avram. So we ask the question, but if you look in the Parsha, all kinds of tough things happen. There's famine, Sarah is captured. Why are we calling this the happy Parsha? It's not happy things. There's all kinds of very unhappy things that occur in the Parsha. So Chassidus explains, but every day you get to be with Avram. So you have a decision. You think about this in life. Would you rather go to Disneyland with a bunch of people you don't really like that much, or clean out the garage with your best friend? So most people in this world say, Disneyland for me, because that's what their sense of a relationship is, fun. And Disneyland is fun, even if you're with a bunch of people from work who you don't really like that much. But everybody puts on airs, the classic office party. That's why it has to get drunk, because they don't like being around each other during work days. Why do you think I want to spend more time with a bunch of people and Bob from accounting, who I don't like him as my accountant? Now I got to go and spend time. So they pass around enough liquor and everybody goes, and so on. But if I have truly a deep friend, so I'll spend time, whatever it is, I'll spend time cleaning out the garage because this is my dear friend and this is the person with whom I wish to spend time. That's Maisim Tovim, which is on top, and that's Tshuva and Maisim Tovim, more than just mitzvah compliance. And again, this is what Chassidus does. It transforms our relationship with Hashem from transactional to personal. And again, some people were not so down with this. It's too touchy-feely. Don't give me this, relationship and this and that. Do what you're told, stand up, sit down, lean to the left, etc. Okay, so how is it possible, where we are up to right now, is with this question about how do we experience, or what is the process that allows us to experience human impact from our spiritual behaviors? So now we return to the analogy of the seed. So one point which we've talked about before, but we're going to see a couple of more nuances here. It's so obvious to us that it sounds almost silly, but imagine if you didn't understand, what is the concept? You take a seed, which is part of the vegetative genre, and you put it in the soil, which is, of course, part of the inanimate. So the soil is what we consider to be a step down. It doesn't even grow. Now, this is like an investment. I had a seed, now I don't have the seed. I put it in the soil, and I don't have instantaneous consequence. And the idea is that when I put it in the soil shares its nutrients with the seed, and thus the seed produces more and more and more. Now, what that seed produces can be essentially infinite. Now, the Rebbe's father has an explanation where he talks about the different aspects or different levels, so to speak, within the seed metaphor. So one is where the seed becomes the edible product, like grains. So that seed becomes edible. Then you have it where the seed becomes a tree. An apple seed doesn't become apples. It becomes an apple tree. The apple tree then produces more fruit. Or where it produces a vegetable where the seed is still edible, like a tomato or a cucumber. I know a tomato is a fruit. It produces a vegetable where the seed itself is edible. So these different characteristics that we observe in botany, which we're not here to study botany, but it just gives us a launching pad to recognize what is the impact that we have in our relationships. Well, we give, of course, we're talking about our relationship with Hashem. By extension, this is true of other relationships, family, friends, community, parents, children, etc. So here we go. Acha Inyan, the point being, and again, we're here to discover how it is that our spiritual behavior has a human, physical, earthly consequence. When you seed seeds or you plant also kernels, grain. Einon muhusim vas musun shal hazer green klal, ki musim vas musum kal v'nika ba'aretz, v'kay chatzemeich shabaretz atzma or atzmai, hu ha-mitzvah magadal hashibaylas va'ilan u'perisav. That when you take this seed, and again, it was so obvious to us, but imagine you never learned this before, and now you put it in the soil. So now the seed becomes absorbed into the soil. I mean, if you dig up, you're not going to find that seed. So that seed now transforms by stimulating the life force, the life-giving force that is found within the soil. That seed is now going to become the grain, the tree, the vegetable. It now has kickstarted a level that is beyond what it would be itself. And if I left the seed just on the out on the table, it would never turn into a tree. Even though putting the seed in the soil is seemingly a downgrade of the seed, I've now taken something of the vegetative genre and put it into the mineral genre. I am still getting a product that is vastly greater than just the seed or just the soil. Even though that seed becomes, or specifically because that seed becomes absorbed in the growth stimulus, the minerals and nutrients, whatever the process is, that is within the soil. Rak, she'enoi moitzi magala, koichel uchutz mea koichel apoyel, kima idei hazer v'agroin shenikovorim ba'aretz. V'kol kol koicham v'koich hatzameich sheba'aretz. V'nesachtu, v'hayel achadim. V'idei zeh, moitzi koich hatzameich as koich el apoyel, mashbiach chayes legadol, shiboilis kein hazer. So again, you might say, well, if the soil is so rich in life, why doesn't it spontaneously produce fruits and trees? It's not going to. The seed stimulates that power of growth and life that is latent within the soil to make it sprout forward the trees and the cucumbers and the whole story. So the seed by itself is not going to turn into a tree. I have to put it in the soil. The soil by itself is not going to suddenly produce a tree. It's only by not just the partnership. And here's really that distinctive quality. It's not just Hewlett Packard, whatever, I can't even think of any other partners anymore. It's not just about two partners pooling their resources. It's about a total surrender of one into the other. The seed becomes absorbed into the soil, and that's what stimulates the soil's power of growth to give it this whole new life. The two blend into and are mevatel themselves. I mean, that's the word that we're talking about, the bittul word, that becomes subsumed completely within that characteristic. It stimulates the power that is otherwise hidden, and it is stimulated by the power that's there. Now, there is a limitation, of course, which is crucial. When I put in an apple seed, I get an apple tree. I don't get a pear tree, meaning there is some commensurate outcome to the behavior. So it's not that it's total infinity, because then I would get anything possibly. I put in an apple seed and get a strawberry. The fact that I put in an apple seed and I get an apple tree emphasizes the link of the cause effect. It's not completely without boundary. Okay. And through this unification of the seed and the soil, it brings out that power of growth that is otherwise contained within the soil. And what does it produce? A tree that produces apples that have seeds that can produce more apple trees, and essentially forever. So the wheat produces the wheat kernel that can produce more wheat, and the cucumber more cucumbers, and so on. And again, you have many, many kernels coming out of one wheat stalk, and many, many seeds coming out of one apple and one apple tree. And the apples that are produced are far more qualitative than that seed. So I have an apple seed. It essentially seems to be without benefit. I plant it in the soil. Now I have apples. And the apple is something far greater than the seed. So now that we go back and revisit that quote in the davening, I think it's page 41, that we say, Zereya tzedakah, we plant tzedakah, matzmiach, it blossoms, Yeshua's rescue. We now understand that it's far more than just a cause effect. Just like that one apple seed produces a tree with abundance of apples that can produce an abundance of apple trees, and apples, which every apple is far more qualitatively valuable than an apple seed, so too, when we do acts of tzedakah, we produce something far greater when, again, it's maisim tovim, it's chesed. And again, you think about this in relationships, when a person acts with, okay, what do I got to do to get what I want? They're only going to get what they want. There's not going to be any discovery and so on. There's not going to be anything more intense than just what's in it for me-ism. And again, the same is true from other vegetation, and it uses this example that we talked about of the cucumber, where the seed itself is edible. Meaning the apple seed is not edible, but it can produce apples that produce seeds, and on and on. The cucumber seed is edible, and so on. And again, that's because I took the apple seed and I invested it in something that appears to be of a lesser characteristic, because soil doesn't even demonstrate the life of growth that vegetation does, because contained within that soil is the nutrients that can produce this kind of apples, tree, and seed, and blah, blah, blah. So again, we see this concept underscored here, that it produces something greater than simply itself. What then is the role of the seed? Is that the seed stimulates the growth power that's in the soil. So in this understanding, and again, we're not here to study the laws of botany, the concept is that the power is really contained in the soil. It's that the seed stimulates the soil to produce, again, still limited because apple seeds produce apple trees and not pear trees. So the seed stimulates something that it would otherwise be latent. And it prompts the soil to express this kind of infinite power and growth. So the seed stimulates something that is otherwise hidden deep within the power of the soil, and it starts to give it this growth. This is called halos man. Now, halos man, the word man, the acronym man, stands for Mayan Nukvin. And this is the idea that God gives us nature, and we turn nature into art. This is the feminine characteristic, to turn nature into art. What prompts Hashem to give us more nature? The more we turn it into art. Just like if you give somebody a raw material and you ask them to make it into something artistic, and they do, you're prompted to go back to them. If they don't, you're not so prompted to go back to them. So Hashem entrusts us with nature, we turn nature into art. The more we turn the nature into art, the more we go back. But again, it's not a competition. Without the soil, there's no apple tree. Without the seed, the power of the soil is undiscovered. But so to speak, the soil doesn't mind, because the soil doesn't have the tendency towards apple trees. It's the apple seed that wants to express itself in apple tree. The only way to do that is to be tapped into the soil. So now back to our analog. Every time we give tzedakah, she'osin Yisrael, that the Jewish people do. Now, why does it say she'osin Yisrael? Because Gentiles, at least according to some interpretations, are also obligated in tzedakah, as we find that the people of Sodom were punished for not being hospitable, even though hospitality is not one of the 7 Noahide laws. So why are they punished? So numerous interpretations, but one that's relevant to us is because they are obligated in the general upkeep of society. So, for example, honoring parents. It's not one of the 7 Noahide laws, but yet Esav is rewarded for honoring his father. Why? Because it promotes the common good. It's part of the general, but that's limited. That's not chesed. That's a limited format, meaning what's necessary to promote the common good. And we have rules about that. We have rules for things like honoring parents and so on. There are baselines. We have rules for tzedakah. We know about baselines for rules for tzedakah. We're not talking about only the quantifiable. We're talking about changing the attitude. Is my attitude driven by what can I do to be helpful to other people? To be driven by a passion to help others. That should be my mentality, not just, well, how much do I have to give and you won't bother me anymore. Shois Yisrael, that's so that we mean when we say Ois Yisrael, again, not that every Jew does it this way, but only the Jew has this infinite quality of his neshama that can go outside of himself. Again, it reaches up to Hashem in this manner called halos man. I am expressing myself. I am reaching out to Hashem. I am making myself available. L'shayrish nishmaseyim, to the root of my neshama. Now, what do we mean, shayrish nishmaseyim? We talk about that before Hashem created the world, he consulted with the neshamas about whether they wanted to be created. So what does that mean? How can you consult with something before you've even created it? Well, it's only the concept of the creation. Again, Hashem is talking about what is it that prompts the entirety of creation. That's what we mean by shayrish nishmaseyim, the root of their neshama. That's what we're talking about, that it's the prompt that brings it to it. It's the deepest level of why Hashem creates the neshama, which is far beyond the particulars of my interaction. It's sort of like the difference between the love a parent has for an adult child which they can explain all the good things the child does, and the love they have for the newborn baby. The newborn baby is only taking, and yet there's this passionate connection because it is driven from the essence of their identity. Hanikr b'shem Knesset Yisrael ve'ematata. The Kabbalistic terms for these levels that rooted in, that prompts, that is the essence of what drives Hashem to create the world, is the collection of the Jewish people, Knesset, like the Knesset, the Congress, and the maternal level of the mother, B'lashon Hazayah, V'Shechina, B'lashon Gemara, or also called the Shechina. It's that level that is there to prompt it into existence. That at that level, the neshama, which is an actual part of Hashem, contains every aspect of Hashem's existence, the entirety of Hashem's existence. It's also sometimes called the characteristic of Malchus. It's the point where it's then expressed. It's finally brought down into the world. And what is the first of the midas? Like Avram is chesed. Wow, what a coincidence. The first of the midas, and when you know it, Avram, the first Jew, is chesed. Is Avram naturally chesed? I don't know, but chesed is what was called for. The quality of chesed is what was absolutely necessary. So that's why Avram was chesed. And when he tried to be gevura and dig wells, it wasn't his thing. So again, this is that level that is embedded in the essence of Hashem. And the neshama that comes from Hashem, like the child who comes from you, contains that characteristic. And what is the premise of all of Hashem's character is chesed. And again, chesed means limitless. And when we go and we reach out to that level of godliness, via our desire to go beyond our restraint, we prompt that Hashem responds with godly chesed. Why? Because we act with godly chesed. We're not just acting with the chesed of response or the chesed of obligation. We're acting in this manner of limitless commitment. Which is, what is Hashem's chesed? The total revelation of God, of godliness. To come and radiate down here within the Jewish neshama. That is, we act in this godly way, and God responds in acting in that godly way. And where is the primary opportunity for us to express this limitlessness of godliness? That's in daven, as we have talked about so many times. When we talk about Hasidim who would daven for hours, why? How slowly can you read the words? If it takes you 45 minutes to daven and you read the words so slowly, it take you an hour, 2 hours. These guys are diving for 8 hours, and it's not because they're not fluent in Hebrew. The Frierdiker Rebbe was like, quote, embarrassed that his father took him so long to daven. What, don't you know how to read? So he said, well, he reads slowly, like Lahavdil, great music is played slowly. It's not about that. It's about how long should it take you to daven? How long do you spend with your best friend? Look, Hashem is unfathomable. There's no practice, there's no thing that is going to bring us to the infinity of Hashem. So what happens when we daven? Because when we daven, it's not just about how we read the words and how we are asking Hashem, can I have a toy? And can I have health? And can I have wealth? And can I have rain in its time? It is that we are completely surrendering our very identity into the infinity of Hashem. It's that moment of oneness with God. And this is that idea, that where we find the infinity of Hashem is specifically when we are, so to speak, surrendered into the infinity of it. Just like the water that comes down and finds its place on the puddle. The same water that's in the sky that rains down is found in the puddle. The same intensity of the infinity of Hashem is found in the most ordinary of behaviors. The Zesh Amar, this is what the pasuk means when it says, Zareach b'choshech, he lights up the darkness, or with light, Le'yasharim, to those who are straight, Chanun, gracious, Varachum, compassionate, Tzaddik, and righteous. That is, that when we conduct ourselves in this manner of kindness and righteousness, Hashem responds to us. And again, there is definitely the transactional. I take care of Hashem's people. Hashem takes care of me. That's true. That is absolutely accurate to say. Like David Mintz, Olav Shalom, said, Hashem wants the poor people to have this tzedakah. I want him to pass it through me. So I'll keep giving it because I like that he gives it to me to give to them. That is true. Here, though, we're talking about a more profound level. Here we're talking about this idea that when we conduct ourselves in this manner of bringing light into darkness, Hashem conducts that way with us to bring us light into darkness. And this is what is called rescue. That is, just like a person is rescued from darkness to light, we become rescued because the infinity of Hashem is expressed to us. It transforms dark to light because the harshest form of captivity is darkness. And we want to go from darkness to light. And this is what it means that it blossoms. Remember the pasuk it's not a pasuk, the quote from the davening that we're working off of. It says, he plants tzedakos and it blossoms Yeshuas. That this rescue is blossomed from the seeds of tzedakah. That it plants in the spiritual worlds this desired land, this desired place. But again, back to the original quote that we started off with. Hu Ashchina u'bnei Yisrael shenikras came. This is the Shechina. And again, remember we said Shechina, which is the origin of the neshama. Why Hashem, or sort of the sense of Hashem's purpose of creation. Al Shem shemislabeshes betachtenim, because it becomes invested in this physical world, because the word Shechina most literally is from the word resident. A shchuna is a neighborhood, a shachin is a neighbor, the mishkan is where Hashem resides. Kamashikos, like it says, Malchuscha, Malchus, again, his expression of self, like the king makes the decision, not just the exalted characteristic of the king, but the executive aspect of the king. Malchus kol elamim is in all circumstances. Ubefrat min aprat kishezorim be'eretz HaKodesh. And now the Alter Rebbe returns to a specific appeal for tzedakah in Eretz Yisrael. That when you plant seeds in Eretz Yisrael, hatachtoina mechavenes keneged the mamish, which is paralleled immediately to Hashem, and that's the distinctive characteristic. Yes, everything that goes on in Eretz Yisrael is thus enriched thereby. Shazrian nikletes tekefumiyad be'eretz al-yona, that the seed is immediately subsumed in the spiritual world. Lishumani of ikuf. Without any hesitation or obstacle. That is the distinctive quality of tzedakah that is given in Eretz Yisrael. How timely. Because there is no friction between the infinity of Hashem and the finity of this physical world when you have Eretz Yisrael. That's the idea, that the soil in Eretz Yisrael itself is holy. The ground itself is sanctified. When we're going to read in a couple of weeks that Avram Avinu purchases the field of Machpelah, it says, "Vayakam stay Ephraim." The field that had belonged to Ephraim was elevated. Why was it elevated? He didn't even bury Sarah there yet. The mere fact that it now came under the jurisdiction of Avram Avinu now gave it a whole new boost, that it's at a whole different level than when it was the material property of Ephron. It now was at an exalted, uplifted level. So this is a distinctive characteristic of all of Eretz Yisrael. Because as Hashem tells Yaakov Avinu, when he has the dream of the ladder going up and down, Hashem says, this is the gateway. That's why we face east when we daven. because there is this concept that Eretz Yisrael, even though it's a physical place with physical laws, is the most aligned naturally with the infinity of Hashem. And as such, it is the immediacy of the cause effect of the infinity of Hashem in this physical world. Mashen came chutz la'aretz v'dal, which is not the case in chutz la'aretz, outside of Eretz Yisrael.